Hey everybody, how you doing? So I started making soap about 15 years ago. What happened is that I started just becoming allergic for whatever reason. I didn't have allergies my whole life, but I started becoming allergic to for whatever reason to any store-bought soap that I would buy. Not allergic, I wouldn't break out, but I just would react and sneeze, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the scent-free soaps. I didn't like the sensitive skin soap. So I looked it up online. This is before YouTube was even that popular, and I didn't find any. I just looked it up online and figured out how to make a very simple soap, and that's what I'm going to show you today. And when I say simple, I mean I don't put any fragrances in it. I don't put any essential oils in it. There's no mango butter, nothing in it except lye, oil, and water. And that's what we'll be making today. So let's get started, and I'll show you what I use to make it. Okay, so here is everything I use to make the simple hot process soap. And the first thing, the biggest thing, is the slow cooker, because this is used in hot process soap. There are other methods, but most people use the slow cooker. It's the easiest. I got this one from Goodwill for 10 bucks. I've used it probably, I don't know, 30, 40 times. I never clean the old soap out. When I'm done, I just put it back and store it. I've heard that the old soap deposits work for the saponification process for new soap. It's never affected my soap to just leave it this way. I just reheat it all the time. Works great. So next most important ingredient or tool for the process is a stick blender. Again, I got this at Goodwill probably for $5. Any stick blender will do. And there's some molds. Now I got these off Amazon. I actually haven't even used them yet. So for years, I've actually used just stuff laying around the house as molds. Old bowls, silverware tray holders, like individual ones, milk cartons for half-gallon milk, cut off the top, use that big square, cut it up later. I've been using those for years, and I just got tired of them because they don't work well. These weren't overly expensive. I got them off Amazon, like I said. They had some good reviews. They weren't that expensive, and I just wanted to use something real for once. So for the ingredients, you got to use distilled water. You can't use regular water out of the tap. It's very cheap at the supermarket. You have to use lye. Now, lye comes in the form of drain opener in some places, but one thing you have to make sure of is that you're using 100% lye. You can also just buy soap making lye off of Amazon or anything like that. I've used this stuff for years. You can get it at Lowe's. I'll put it in the description. It works great. Now you can use all different kinds of oils for making the soap, but I use olive oil and coconut oil. So there are all kinds of soap ingredient calculators on the net. I'll show you the one that I use. I'll put it right up on the screen right now. Next is a scale. This is probably the most important thing. If you don't get your measurements right, this isn't like just regular cooking where you just put in a few ounces of this, a pinch of that. You have to be pretty exact, or as close as you can be. And then a bowl for mixing the lye and the distilled water. That's all the tools and the ingredients that I use for my soap making. So let's get to it. Okay, so I use coconut oil, and in order to make sure that the coconut oil is nice and melted before I have everything else ready in the olive oil, I like to get it nice and melted, so I always measure it out first. Okay, so I'm going to need 9.6 ounces, so I have my bowl on here and I have to zero out the scale. And then make sure that your scale is set to measure by weight in terms of ounces. And I'm just going to scoop this in here, and I need 9.6 ounces of coconut oil. Okay, that's exactly 9.6 ounces. So I usually get the coconut oil going first, and that involves putting the slow cooker on high. So I did that right away, and now I'll go out and measure the coconut oil. Okay, let's just pour this coconut oil in here. Use a nice rubber spatula and scrape out as much as you can, because remember, you measured out 9.6 ounces or whatever your ratio is, and if you leave even a tiny bit out, you'll be off. So scrape out as much as you can. Okay, so we will just leave that to melt and come up to temperature. And in the meantime, we'll get the lye going, with the lye with the water. because that will take a while to cool down enough to pour in. So we'll get that going next. Okay, so the next thing I need is distilled water to mix with the lye, and I need 18.24 ounces of water, distilled water. Okay, so that's 18.2 ounces of distilled water. So we're going to put the lye into this water, and always remember that you have to pour the lye into the water and not the water into the lye. If you pour the water on top of the lye, it'll just come up all over the place and froth and get all over the place. You don't want to do that. And this is a chemical, lye is a chemical, so you got to be careful. And I recommend when you do this next process where you mix the water with the lye that you wear goggles, gloves, and protective equipment. Okay, so we need 6.96 ounces of lye to mix with the water. 6.96. There we go. Okay, now when I do this, I do it on the stove, and I turn the vent fan on for the microwave above the stove. I turn the vent fan on because you will get caustic chemical smell coming from this. I would not breathe it in. I would do this outside or near ventilation of some sort. And this is going to get up to about 160, 170 degrees Fahrenheit as you stir it in. Again, if you're careful, it's not dangerous, but again, just be careful. Okay, so while the lye distilled water mixture is cooling, I'm going to go ahead and weigh out my olive oil. I already have the coconut oil in the slow cooker. So now I'm going to measure out the olive oil to mix in with it. And I need 38.4 ounces. Okay, so there's 38.4 ounces of olive oil. We're going to go ahead and stir it in. Okay, so back over here to the lye, you can see that it's nice and cleared up now. And I've turned off the vent fan because the chemical reaction is done. It's not spewing off noxious fumes anymore. So let's see what the temperature is now. Looks like it's 150 or so. You want to let this cool down to where it gets to the point where it's, you know, within 10-20 degrees of the oils, which are over there in the crock pot already. You don't want to mix them together when they're too far apart. It can cause issues. The lye water mixture will cool down relatively quickly. So we'll check back in a minute. Okay, so the lye distilled water mixture is cool enough now that it's within 10-15 degrees of the temperature of this oil. So I'm going to pour it in very carefully. I can actually grab the bowl now because it's cooled down enough. I can grab the bowl without a hot pad or anything. And I'm just going to pour it in very carefully to the oil. And right away you're going to see the oil change color. So now that the lye is in there and with the coconut oil and the olive oil, it's time to bring out the stick blender. You're doing this until you get a trace on the oil, which I'll show you up close in a minute. This is going to take several minutes, so just be prepared for that. And you'll see how I kind of mix and come up and turn the stick mixer sideways and things just to try to get it agitated. So make sure that the stick mixer is submerged in the oil before you turn it on so you don't splash everywhere. Like I said, you're going to see this change color very quickly, and this will take several minutes. So just keep going and be patient. You're going to see me checking periodically, stopping to check the trace to see if an impression is left in the soap when I let it drip. There's no impression being made, it's just dripping in there like liquid still. see that I'm starting to get a bit of a trace. It's been about 8 minutes. I'm beginning to get about a bit of a trace here. You can see with the impression when the drips from the stick blender go back into the soap, but it's not quite there yet. Okay, you can start to see how we're getting the impressions there. It doesn't just sink back in when you drip stuff on top. So I think we're done with that. We're going to take the stick blender and rinse it off. After about 10 minutes of blending with the stick blender, we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and take the spatula and scrape off all the stuff that built up on the sides. Get it down in there. Stir it up just a little bit. And then what we're going to do, and this is one of the most important steps, if you forget to do this, it's going to cause problems. You got to put the cooking temp on the slow cooker from high to low. If you don't do that, you'll find out what happens the same way I did, where within about 10 or 15 minutes it'll just boil over and you'll have it all over your counter. But you do not want that. So put it down to low and put the lid on and leave it alone for 30 minutes. It'll start to bubble up and it'll start to turn colors and it'll move on to what they call the Vaseline state, the Vaseline texture state. So we'll be back to look at it in about 30 minutes. Okay, it's been about 30 minutes. Let's take a look at this. As you can see, puffed up quite a bit. You can see that it's raised up on all the edges in the middle. You don't see any of the old yogurt type texture left or yogurt type consistency left. So it's all the Vaseline type consistency now. It's darker in some areas than others, but let's give it a stir. You can see light, you can see dark. There's different colors in here. This is 30 minutes. We'll give it a few more before we decide it's done, ready to pour in the mold. I'd like it a little bit darker than this. Usually it gets darker as time goes on. So we'll give it about another 15 minutes after the stir. Okay, it's been about 20 more minutes, so let's stir it again. And at this point, it's been going for quite a while, and it's boiled down quite a bit too, even though the lid was on. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the mold now. I think it's fine. Been going for close to an hour, and I think that's enough time. So let's get that ready. Okay, so we're just going to spoon these into these molds, and I've never used these molds before, but they're promising. Like anything else, just stir it up really good until the color's kind of uniform. It's going to cool down relatively quickly, so you don't want to mess around. Just get this stuff in there. Now I unplugged the slow cooker because there's no reason to have it plugged in at this point. And I actually don't know how it's going to fill these molds, if it's going to fill it all the way or if I'm going to have to do something else because I've never used these. Now, what I like to do is tap the mold when I have about an inch of it in before it's full. Tap it down to get it nice and flat on the bottom, otherwise you'll have air pockets and things. It'll flatten out nice. And just keep filling. You know, you could use like a little scraper or something over the top. I don't really need to do that. I think that that's fine. Okay, so the second mold probably isn't going to fill up all the way with what I have left. So I don't know how I'm going to deal with that, but I think it'll be fine. I'll just leave this. I'll just have a, small bit of soap on the bottom. And I'll probably just cut the soap differently so that it turns out okay. I'll cut it differently than the other mold. Not a big deal. None of this soap, this isn't something that's selling or even gifting. So just needs to look just needs to work in the shower, right? So let's tap this down, kind of try to even it out there on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and leave those overnight, at least 8 hours. They have to cool before you can take them out of these molds. Now the good thing is it's hot process, so you don't have to wait weeks and weeks and weeks for it like you do with cold process, but you do have to wait overnight to take them out of the mold. And you probably have to wait a week after that for them to completely cure. But I'll come back when they've sat overnight and they're ready to take out of the mold. Okay, it's been about 24 hours and it's time to get this soap out of the mold and cut it up. I have my little mold cutter here, and this came with that kit that came with these molds on Amazon. But again, you can use a knife, you can use all kinds of different things. You could use a putty knife, but this thing works really well, I think. So we're gonna put these out onto the cutting board, and then we're going to cut them. Now some people will take a tape measure and measure out like exactly an inch or a 2-inch long bar. I just kind of guesstimate it. It's not that important to me. I'm not giving these away as gifts. I'm not selling them. I'm just using them. So let's get started on that. And that's nice. It's the first time I've ever used these, and they work pretty good. So, like I said, I'm just going to eyeball it now. The eyeballing works for the first few cuts when you do something like this. But when you get down to the very end, you got to look at it a little bit more carefully so you don't end up with a sliver as a piece of soap. But for the most part, you can just eyeball it. Okay, like I said, I'm down here at the end, and I got a pretty thick piece. I'm just going to make sure and look at it so I can pretty much cut it evenly in two. Have a couple of thicker bars of soap, no big deal. And then what we'll do is bring over this tray, and we're just going to stack them up here individually like this, so that they have some air around them so that they can dry, because they have to sit here for a couple weeks and dry out, maybe a week or two. You can't use them right away. They're ready to use right away. You could use them, but they're soft right now, so they would go away really quick. The water would just take them really quick because they're so soft. So I let them dry out, get harder over the course of about a week. Now, this is because we used a hot process. That's why they're ready to use right away if you want. They only take a week or two to harden up. If you used a cold process, which I'm sure you've seen online also, it's a little bit easier. You don't need a slow cooker and things like that, but it takes like 2 or 3 months for the soap to be ready after you're done making it. So that's it, folks. So that's it. We made the soap. Hope you had a good time hanging out with me making it. It's a fun thing to do. Guys can make soap too. It's no big deal if you find that you don't like the soap that you're getting in stores, or it's making you itch, or you just don't like all the fragrances or whatever reason. Go ahead and try making soap using hot process. It's kind of fun. If you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.